Oh no.
Ten, nine, eight, seven, six, five, four, three, two, one.
Game over.
How's it going, everybody? It's that was an interesting finish, but you know what? A pretty great game by the Montreal Canadiens overall. And I've got Jack Hahn here with me to break it down. So let's bring him in. Jack, how you feeling?
I'm feeling fantastic. I actually enjoyed watching that game because there was a lot to it.
There
There was a lot to it.
was. It was an enjoyable game. I think a lot of Habs fans that want to see wins, which I think there's less of them now than there has been most of the time, right? Because the team very clearly is going to be tanking this year, intentionally or not. But like a bit of a heartbreaker to have Corey Perry score the tying goal and then lose it in the last minute or so. But overall, that was pretty darn good.
Yeah, so as we were discussing before, like the section of the fan base that's like hoping for good play but also hoping for losses, like this is the kind of game for them.
Exactly, exactly. This is almost exactly what you want to see out of a tanking team. You want the kids to play pretty well. Suzuki was great, I thought. You want to have the team like show pride. The one thing that is like a bit of a takeaway from me this game, it's a little bit of a negative, is if there was any doubt that this team has not been trying very hard over the last stretch, this game kind of shows that they haven't been trying that hard over the last stretch.
Like the one thing that really stuck out to me was how they managed to keep shots against low, and it's a very counterintuitive process basically because they did it by holding onto the puck and stringing passes together and not necessarily looking for that stretch play or that kind of that Hail Mary, because they've been doing that. Like in, I would say most of the games I've watched this season, you see a lot of like long stretch passes north that doesn't lead to anything, and then right away the other team is coming back with speed. So, and for most of the game, I thought Montreal did a better job than usual of just like playing with the puck, like just nicely, taking the puck, control the tempo, move it D to D, finding short passes, like using the back of the net on the breakout, like hitting the low support player. They weren't creating breakaways. Like the breakaway that you saw was Lehkonen like on a high flip, right? But those plays are few and far between. So basically, what Montreal is doing right now is they're getting their hands warmed up, they're getting the feel back, and then they're just looking to control the tempo without necessarily looking to create like a grade A chance. But then by doing that, they didn't give up all that much until the very end.
Yeah, I thought also their forecheck was really solid tonight. It seemed like they were, especially in the first and second periods, giving the Tampa Bay Lightning fits. They were creating a lot of turnovers in the Lightning zone and kind of catching them on the boards a lot and moving the puck off the wall a little bit better than usual. Not so much in the first period, in the second period a bit better. But I think that's something that you've pointed out several times now on this show and on Twitter, is the Canadians struggle to move the puck off the wall. Do you find tonight that they were doing that a little bit more successfully?
So, I mean, I talk about it all the time because basically at any level of hockey, whether it's like Pee Wee up until the NHL, like that's the toughest thing to do is to get the puck from the wall into a position where you can actually have some time and space to make plays with it. So that's a universal thing. Um, the second thing is that you notice the forecheck being more effective, and it's a result of all five skaters being more connected, and you get more connected once again by getting a few passes strung up early in the sequence, maybe exiting your zone with control. And then when you do that, all five players are going to be coming across the neutral zone. And then once you dump it in, then you can get into whatever your forecheck is and then have your Ds be in a position to pinch if need be. Whereas like I watched Colorado and Philadelphia, and Philadelphia right now is the worst version of a team that just has zero poise with the puck because basically for the past like however long Vino has been there with Terry, and they've been they've been telling their players to just shoot the puck north as soon as they can, and then to then they send in their forecheckers. But what happens is their Ds and their forwards become so disconnected. Like the Ds have zero patience with the puck, and then the forwards they get sick and tired of forechecking and then not being able to make a stop and then having to back check. And I mean, they gave up 50 shots against Colorado, 50 shots. Like that's huge. That's a huge number against any team. But so tonight, like we have the opposite situation where Montreal, despite losing, they actually controlled the tempo really well.
Yeah, it was obvious like that this game meant something to a lot of the guys in that room. I think one of the guys that it very clearly meant a lot to was David Savard, and we chatted a bit before we went live here about him getting his Stanley Cup ring, and I didn't see it. I didn't check out Twitter before the game or anything. Busy with the kids before bedtime, right? But apparently it's really cool, you were saying, Jack, but clearly he was hyped to play his former team tonight.
Yeah, so first about the ring, it's sick. Like you got to go catch the video of him getting the ring because like Stanley Cup rings they're really impressive, they're really huge. But what really impressed me was the case, because you open up this box and then there's like a screen the size of like a Nintendo DS or whatever, and it's playing a clip of I think it might even be David Savard getting the Stanley Cup, which is like one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And I've never, the only Stanley Cup ring I've seen up close was Sergio Momesso's 86 ring, and his was like really tiny. It's like almost a ring that you can wear every day. Like I haven't seen or held like a modern Stanley Cup ring, but I did get an AHL Calder Cup ring, and it's like maybe 2/3 of the size of what NHL teams give to their Stanley Cup winners. But it's really impressive. Like if you ever have a chance to check out like an actual Stanley Cup ring, like do it. And also if you ever have a chance to like check out like the case that I'm talking about, like do it as well.
Yeah, it sounds really sick. I mean, the Lightning last time they won the cup, like the first, I guess not their first cup, but the first of the back-to-back cups, I think they had the biggest ring ever of any NHL team. So clearly this is a team that cares about the rings. Not very wearable, unfortunately.
Not
Kind of the kind of
wearable
things that you want to
whatsoever.
put in a safety deposit box.
Yeah, which is like it's sad for me because it kind of goes against the purpose, because it's the kind of thing that like you could never wear on a daily basis. You might take it out like just to show people, but then you immediately have to put it back in the safe because you're just so paranoid about it getting stolen. And the other thing I want to talk about is are you familiar with the concept of money on the board?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, if let's say you're on the Habs and used to play for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they're coming in to visit, you're going to put up money on the board that's going to go toward a team activity if the team wins. Okay, and I would not be surprised if David Savard went like low to mid four figures on the money board tonight.
Yeah,
Because
I
I
would.
mean, he's got the contract, and like it's a way to get the boys revved up, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and it looked like Corey Perry did as well. Because I think you could argue that, strange as it is, the two guys that were on opposite teams last year might have been each team's best player tonight. Which I know that Corey Perry's goal, I think the puck glanced off Savard before he actually got the puck and shoveled it into the net. But despite that little gaff, I thought Savard had some incredible plays tonight. Set up the Suzuki goal to start things coming back. He has these weird things where you expect him to just have zero offense whatsoever, but he's surprisingly good at just beating one checker from the blue line in towards the middle and kind of like creating something that's sloppy, but kind of gets the opponents off their game a little bit. And we've seen a handful of times this year where he just makes one little move to the inside and creates a decent chance. And he's still David Savard, so it's rare that he's going to finish that play, but he got something going tonight.
Well, I mean, so first of all, certainly Savard was very noticeable tonight. I thought maybe he ran out of gas a little bit on that Palat game winner. Like he pinches down the wall in the offensive zone, and he probably just like he's like a step and a half behind. And for a guy who's been playing big minutes and getting really involved, like I'm not surprised. I don't really blame him. Like I could definitely see that he's really kind of put it all on the line tonight. And the other thing, like you got to understand is he was probably the best offensive defenseman in his age group growing up, like from the ages of, I don't know, like 12 to all the way up to 20. And then it was only after he made the pros that he was asked to play more on the PK and to simplify his game and take fewer risks and so on and so forth. So all that stuff, it's like, especially the instinct to like jump into plays, like it's in him, like he's got it, right? So one of the things I noticed, like having coached in the AHL and scouted a lot of NHL players, is like defensemen, they actually get worse with time, because what happens is, like, I mentioned Philly, and Philly is kind of like the best case study for this, which is you get punished disproportionately for trying things as a D. And once you stop trying things, and once you start being extremely predictable, like going glass and out, or backing off instead of pinching, like it's kind of like use it or lose it. So once you hit your like mid to late 20s, like kind of where Sami Niku is now, like if you're not using it and you haven't established yourself as an offensive guy, you're probably not going to be that guy anymore. And it's really difficult for you to get it back in your 30s. It's exceedingly rare. Unless you're in a situation like Savard, where it's just he's got nobody else and he's got to do it, and then even then, like, you see that it's a little bit sloppy. So once again, like a lot of times you'll see defensemen putting up a lot of points, like in the AHL or in Europe, and then some of them, they just don't quite make it, and then those that don't, they quickly wash out, because when offense is your calling card, but all of a sudden you don't have permission anymore, then what do you have left? So it's really tough to be a D-man in the NHL, especially if you're kind of like on the fringes.
Yeah, I think you see that a lot, that guys who can't establish themselves as like go-to offensive guys, and that was their bread and butter coming out of junior or college, things have to change right away for them to stay into the league. I mean, you look at like the way that Nathan Beaulieu developed, or I guess you could put in quotes, developed in the NHL, right? He came in, he was like a premier first pass guy, great skater, and that was his game, right? And then all of a sudden, now you look at him, and his big thing is leaning on toughness and being willing to fight. And that's about all he can do, because he's not very good defensively, and he's not putting up numbers offensively either. So there's a lot of guys like that who probably have a lot more talent than we expect, but never get the chance to show it. I have a moderately funny story that a couple of years ago, I don't know if you remember when the gold medal final for the World Juniors was in Montreal. And I don't remember if I bought them or if I got them, but I got tickets to that gold medal game. And I took a friend of mine named James David, who's a really good friend, really awesome guy, and very funny. And there was, like, in that game, the main thing that I remember was like Thomas Chabot played something like 42 minutes of the 60 something minutes, because it went to overtime, and the Americans won it. And there was the 7th defenseman on Team Canada, who the whole time, every time he touched the puck, was just like an utter complete disaster, but he kept on getting thrown out there. And by the end of the first period, we were like full on, like, get this guy off the ice. Every time he touched the puck, we were like, no, like everyone in our section was, no. And that was Kale Clague, who the Canadiens just picked up. And I believe it was his first shift as a Canadian defenseman, whiffed on that puck and allowed Patrick Maroon to open the scoring. I feel awful for the kid, because that's a horrible way to start your time with a new team. But I mean, he's obviously not the same player as he was in that World Junior tournament. It's totally unfair to judge somebody on one tournament, especially when they're not like one of the premier guys. But it just makes me laugh that exactly how I remembered him is exactly how he showed up in his first little bit with the Montreal Canadiens.
I don't think it might have been like the 3rd or 4th shift, because I remember him having a couple uneventful shifts on the ice before that pass. But it's funny you bring up World Juniors, because my first impression of Kale Clague was like going on Twitter and looking at some of the like the hand track stats that hockey people would like hockey Twitter people would keep on like the World Juniors, and he consistently had the lowest Corsi of all the Team Canada Ds. Like I think it was that year, but basically at that level, he looked like he was completely overwhelmed for whatever reason, because obviously he was gonna play shelter minutes on a really strong team, and for whatever reason he was still something like 30 or 40% shot share when he was on the ice, which I found curious, because if you look at his junior stats, like they're really good, he put up points, but the more you watch him, the more you realize that he's a good skater, uh he's a good passer, he's got good shot. It's just he has trouble reading pressure. That's the thing.
Seems like a bit of an issue for a defenseman.
Yeah, I mean, it's who knows? Maybe he figures it out, because I think the skill set's there, and certainly he's going to get a few looks because, maybe the Habs, he could be a next kind of waiver wire pickup like Paul Byron was, right? You get a player for free and it turns out really good. He's not overly old, but once again, like he's kind of in that spot that I mentioned before, where as a D, you got to make a decision, which is either you stick with the offense and maybe you get cut and you have to go play in Europe, or you really simplify your game and you satisfy yourself with like being in the NHL, but just barely.
Yeah, actually really like the Canadiens threw him out on the power play there. I don't know. I think they only got a couple power plays tonight, but I like that they're trying something, And as much as it's funny, like thinking about how I was like basically introduced to Kale Clague, watching him struggle in that World Juniors and the beginning of this game tonight. But like you said, there could be something there at 23 years old, former second round pick, mid second round pick. This is a bet worth making, right? Like this is kind of one of the advantages that you have in a season that's essentially lost with almost 60 games left to play is sorry, excuse me. You can take a bet like Kale Clague and just give him reps all season long and see if he can build something out of it. And I think that's something the Canadiens should do down the stretch here.
Yeah, and then the other thing also is that to have enough human resources in house to actually build a curriculum for these players, and hone in on what we talked about, which is his ability to create time and space for himself. Because basically the problem with Kale Clague is he's playing kind of in this, he has tunnel vision and he can't use his feet to create options for himself, and like on that goal against, obviously the puck bounced over his stick. It was bad luck, but who was he passing to? Like he was passing right at the pressure. Like this is a situation where you take the puck and either you hold it or you cut back and you come out the other side, or you carry it somewhere. Like there's no pass to be made there. Like it could only end up, it's either a suicide pass to a teammate or whatever happened there happened.
Yeah, I mean, you know what it reminded me of is watching myself play hockey. And when I'm just like under pressure and I have no time, I'm just like, just smack the ball away or the puck away. Just like, get it away from me. Make it somebody else's problem. But obviously not at this level.
But this feeling is universal, because if you play at a high enough level, like at some point you're gonna start feeling overwhelmed like that. So for you, it might be like C level ball hockey, but for other guys it could be AHL. For other guys, it could be NHL.
Even C level is probably a little bit too high, Jack. You can lower it down. You can go further down.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is actually a lot of NHL players, they feel the same things that you're feeling, because that it's just a natural thing. And the best way to counteract that is simply slow down the tempo. So, I talked about off the top about how the Habs did a good job managing the tempo. And that's because for most of the year, they were trying to play at a tempo that was completely unsustainable for them. They didn't have the horses. They couldn't string together enough plays. When they were trailing, their way of playing completely fell apart. They couldn't really generate any sort of real sustained push. When they were up, they play okay, but they seldom had the lead. Whereas tonight, like once again, if you're feeling the panic, which is something that we talked a lot about when I was coaching in Toronto, like if you're feeling the panic, you got to slow it down. Your reaction to feeling panicked on the ice cannot be, I'm just going to throw this puck away, because generally that leads to either your teammates getting blown up because you're throwing them suicide passes, or it leads to turnovers and then the other team's coming back into your zone with speed.
So let's break that situation down for Clegg there. If you're talking to him and he has that puck on his forehand along the boards there, his back is to the boards. What's the play? Do you kind of take it on your backhand and push it back against the boards? Do you try to turn your body and rim it back behind the net, or try to go up the boards the same way? On first of all, I guess it matters what's his strong side, right?
Sure. So it's less about a specific decision, more about building capacity, right? Because let's say that you're hopping on a bike and you're riding for 50 kilometers. You're building capacity, right, in your legs and your lungs and your heart, whatever. If you're lifting weights, you're building capacity. So for him, or most other young players, you're trying to build capacity for problem solving. So one of the tells that I see in Clague's game is when he has the puck on his stick, he has difficulty shifting his weight or crossing his feet or getting on one of his foot. Like he's very centered when he has the puck. So if you're passing the puck out front, like north, no problem. If you're passing a D to D, you're okay. But anything other than that, like any kind of improvisational move that you have to make, you're very limited, right? And you can still be a great player without necessarily having that. Like Jeff Petrie shows a lot of the same things, but he's so big and strong and fast that he can kind of get himself out of it, right? Whereas if you look at Romanov, let's say, he has the potential to do that because I actually really like his skating and his posture, but he doesn't really see the play, or he doesn't really feel confident enough to try things. So every player is a little bit different like that.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, like it. I guess for me as well, it's time to figure out like what the plan is, right, for the Montreal Canadiens. And sorry, I'm just struggling to gather my thoughts here. I'm a little bit under the weather, so things are struggling in my throat. But for Kale Clague, obviously there's a lot of things that he has to get right in his play and with handling the puck. Sorry, I'm just something that you mentioned about him having trouble shifting his weight from side to side. It reminds me of maybe I'm wrong here, but didn't you say there was a similar issue with Alex Galchenyuk where he was too solid in his feet, and that was one of his issues why he also kept on getting knee injuries, because he was trying to make these shifty maneuvers and his feet were kind of staying planted?
Well, like Galchenyuk was a really extreme case. Like it was really, 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 really obvious with him. And like Clague is more of just like you see it a little bit, and hopefully you can work on that. Whereas Galchenyuk, it was like, it was not only a technical issue, it was going to be like a physical issue too, because he has a history of the knee injuries, right? So with Clague, it's like if you put in enough reps over time, I think you can get better at it. And I think it's still like, not to say that he's going to be a top pair guy, but like it's the kind of little daily habits that over time makes a difference. It's like, if you wake up and decide that you're going to go for a 30-minute jog as opposed to not doing that jog, like, 5 years down the road, it does make a big difference. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see if he can build something out of this season here, and hopefully some opportunity that the Canadians can throw his way, because there is something there, hopefully. But the Canadians have had a lot of trouble turning like the diamonds in the rough into diamonds. It's a lot of staying rough with the guys that they've been picking up. So we'll move on from Kale Clague a little bit. Jake Allen, I thought, was yet again incredible tonight. This has probably been his best overall stretch of the season, the last 5 games for coming back from injury. It's not to the point where he's going to ruin the tank, obviously, because they managed to blow this game anyway in the last minute. But when it comes down to Carey Price and Jake Allen in net, I have a feeling this team might win a little bit more down the stretch and not be on pace for like the 18 games that they're about to win this season if you look at their current pace.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like the things that I see from Allen is just like he's a solid goalie. Like he's not going to necessarily steal a lot of games, but like tonight, I thought his team actually for once like helped him out a lot by
Yeah.
cutting down the number of rush chances. Like the game winner was one of the rare times where Tampa really was able to develop a lot of speed and then get to the middle on him. The first goal, I think he was probably really surprised that there was a turnover so close to his net. The second, that 6-on-5 goal, like that was just a good setup by Stamkos to Perry, and it's a tough read for the goalie, like pushing across in so much traffic. Like I would give him a solid B plus tonight. Like he obviously, if he had made one more save, then this game could have been won. But at the same time, he didn't really give up that much.
Yeah, and I think a solid B plus is what you expect from Jake Allen, right? Like he is not signed to be Andre Vasilevsky. Like what he's giving right now is very, very solid. Comment here, can we have a drinking show? I mean, we might have to do that down the stretch this season. Depends how bad things get, because it's already pretty bad. We're not yet running out of things to talk about because there's always new players coming up, and there's the philosophical musings of where the organization's going to go and the new management structure, which is always really interesting to talk about. They could hire a general manager. We could talk about that. But eventually, at some point this season, in and around probably like the 60 game mark or something, or like after the trade deadline when there's nothing really to play for, we might have to have a drinking show. We'll see if YouTube allows that, but I think that'd be pretty fun. Maybe like do a show where you're taking shots every time something gets mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a number of local microbreweries who'd be happy to sponsor that show. I think as a commercial tie-in, it could be pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be pretty fun.
So as an aside, do you want to know what it's like to play hockey at the Bell Center?
I've skated at the Bell Center, but sure,
Oh, you
played
have?
hockey. Yeah.
You never play hockey there?
No, only skated. I got to go to like a free skate. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll tell you, I don't know if you talked about this, but so I worked for the Habs in 2013, 2014 in marketing, and I basically wrote for the website and ran the Twitter account that year. And maybe one morning every other week, we would get an invitation to go and skate with like some of the support staff. So like not hockey ops people, but like maybe some of the trainers or some of the marketing people, some of the advertising people from Ethics. So we would have this like morning game at like 6:30 a.m. And so I didn't drive back then, so I would cab in the morning, like go through the media entrance, and then we would set up in like one of the visiting locker rooms, and it was really cool because we had like towel service and everything, because like the trainers, like they would actually set up for us,
That's
and
nice.
I was able to do that maybe like 5 or 6 times that season, I want to say. But like some of like the skill level was actually really the gap was really wide. Like we had some guys who like played major junior, and then others were no better than like maybe beginners almost, right? But it was really fun, and there's actually a lot of little quirks about skating on an NHL rink that you kind of take for granted. So the first thing is, because it's a much bigger building, like if you compare that to any kind of community rink, like the ceilings is obviously much higher because you have the stands, and it just feels like really cavernous. And once in a while, like because there's no crowd and there's nothing there, right? Like you would hit the post and you would just kind of lose the puck because you have no idea like how high it's bouncing, and like all the seats are like it's kind of black, right? So and then about 10 seconds later, like you would hear like the puck drop like somewhere in the opposite corner. Like it was really eerie. Like you would shoot the puck and like it would go into the twilight zone for like a few seconds, and then you would kind of see it appear somewhere else. The other thing is, I haven't skated in that many NHL buildings. It's just at the Bell Center and at the Scotiabank Arena that I've been ice level. But the bench, like the players' bench at the Bell Center, is the crappiest bench I've ever seen in any rink. It's like this old wooden bench. They might have kept it from the Forum, honestly. Like
That
maybe
might be what it
that's
is.
why.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like it's made out of like hardwood that it looks like it's 60 years old at least. It's placed way too close to the boards, so like you have a tough time getting out of there once you sit down, because the bench and the boards are like much closer than you would usually expect it to be. And then at the very end of the bench, like kind of where I think between where like the players stop and the backup goalie starts, the bench actually it was shaved. Like it's got this like roundedness to it because the door has to swing open. So the bench is so close to the boards that they have to like sand it down or shave it so that the door can like open and close. So it was like the most it was weird because like the Bell Center for me is like it's one of the best design buildings in the NHL, but then like the bench setup is one of the worst I've ever seen. It's really strange.
I feel like it makes sense to do that for like the visitor bench, but when it's the home bench, it's like how much are you gonna sacrifice for tradition? I get it if it's from the forum to bring like something, but I don't know, put that in the alumni room instead and get a modern bench because that's just I don't know. Maybe it's something that players actually appreciate because of the history. I had a conversation with John LeClaire last week for another gig that I do, and it was really interesting to hear because you expect like John LeClaire is most associated with the Flyers, right? Because that's where he had the big prime of his career. But the way that he talked, and like I asked him a few questions. One was like name like your top uh, lineup of all time of players that you've never shared the ice with, and a lot of it he leaned on his history, like the history that he learned while he was a Montreal Canadian. Just the way he talked about being a Montreal Canadian, I was like, man, this guy like he really gave a shit. Like he wanted to be a Montreal Canadian. It was incredible how much he remembered and how much attachment he still has to the franchise, which I guess like to an extent you say, yeah, he won a cup here, but also he didn't play in Montreal that long, and the best parts of his career outside of that Stanley Cup were all in Philadelphia. So it was really interesting to hear that perspective of a guy that actually still has that attachment that you wouldn't expect. But that history does matter to some players, I'm sure. But yeah, get a modern bench. it's that's a weird thing. One thing that stuck out to me when I skated at the Bell Center, because I've only ever skated there in terms of like professional rinks, was the ice is amazing compared to skating on any other rink that I've ever skated on in my life. I was like, wow, it's so easy to skate on this ice. And it was like obviously not in game shape because they were doing free skates for season ticket holders at the time. So it was like 45 minutes, a bunch of people out there, and then you get off, they do a quick scrape, and then another group goes on. And we were like the fifth of the day. So like by NHL standards, it was probably chewed up like crazy. But you see like the standard of what people at that level expect for ice quality is just so much higher than you would ever imagine. I know this is probably a little bit too much of inside baseball, a little bit boring for the viewers here. So let's switch back and talk about the game a little bit. Laurent Dauphin got his first game today. He seemed to have a pretty strong defensive game. Anything stand out to you from Dauphin today, Jack?
I mean, I definitely saw him involved in a lot of battles, but in terms of his skill set, like he's kind of like your classic tweener that you can bring him up for a few games and he'll try hard and he'll be into spots defensively. But it's just like once again, there's not a lot of high-end skill that's going to sustain his play. So for like that adrenaline that you get is going to wear off and within 2 or 5 games, and then afterwards it's going to be tough to stay at this level unless you're bringing something extra. And there's a lot of players like him, and it's not to denigrate him or anything. Like he's doing very well at the AHL level, and that's really the separating factor. Like for instance, in when I was in Toronto with the Marlies, I had Nick Petan. And Nick Petan, like if you just watch him handle the puck and play in practice or even play in AHL games, like he's one of the most skilled players of the league, right? But it's just for him, it's more on the physical side where as an extremely small guy, he wasn't able to outrun people. So then he was always in the battle, and then he tended to lose those battles. So he would come up with the leads for a game here and there, but it was tough for him to sustain that level. And I believe now he's back in the Canucks organization, but he's playing Abbotsford if memory serves. So you have a lot of guys like that.
Yeah, I find that's one thing that is a constant annoyance for me with the. I don't want to rag too much on media, but media people have an issue separating puck skills from talent, right? Like you hear all the time, and I think Joe Druin's been fantastic this season overall, above my expectations. He's given it all most of the time when he's out on the ice. One of the guys who's trying every game. But you hear it all the time, like, oh, you watch him in practice, and he's the most skilled guy out there, and he's incredible. And like, yeah, puck skills, fantastic. But like, if you were to ask the average media person, like, who's more skilled between Jonathan Drouin and Brendan Gallagher, they're going to go with Jonathan Drouin every time. And like, yes, in terms of puck skills, but in terms of like the skills that translate to the actual game on the ice, like, I would say Brendan Gallagher has a better skill set.
I'm not a huge music person necessarily, but I would equate that to someone having a nice voice and someone being a really great singer, or especially a really great singer songwriter, right? Like someone who has a good voice or even a great voice, like you know it when you hear it, but then someone who's a transcendent, has a very kind of unique voice, or someone who's good at songwriting, who's really creative, and like that's just another category. Like the singers and artists that we know the best are not the people necessarily the best voices, or the best acting mannerisms, whatever. It's people that are able to create something, and that it's not the same thing.
Yeah, that's actually a great analogy. It reminds me of, I watched a video on Johnny Cash's vocalizations during his remake of the song "Hurt" by Nine Inch Nails. Now, like, it's not necessarily good singing, but it's like extremely effective singing to convey the emotions that he's feeling, and that's it's a good analogy, Jack. I'm with you there.
Yeah, like I don't know if you like Bob Dylan, but Bob Dylan is one of the worst singers I've ever heard.
Awful
But
singer, amazing songwriter.
yeah, so but undeniable in his impact. But it's just he's like the Mark Stone of singers.
With that choppy skating stride, but he always gets where he wants.
Yep.
That was there was actually a topic that came up recently about Elias Pettersson not being a great skater, but extremely effective skater.
Well, better now, right? And once again, it's like you have to allow a level of like idiosyncrasy if you're a star player. Like you can't expect your star players to be textbook. Like, if we talk about Nick Suzuki, right? A lot of the things that he does is textbook. And yet for me, the thing that leaves me the most kind of wanting in his case is I wish he would try more things, because it's like he colors inside the line at all times.
Yeah, and you want him to use his skill to do something great, right? And you want him to be that guy that can break open a game, and instead it's that coloring inside the lines that kind of makes him such a great defensive player. But if you want to get that bit of offense out of him that you can see it could happen, he's got to break out of it a little bit. I don't know if there's much more to chat about in this game. It was a really entertaining game, but I'm a little bit under the weather, so we'll probably wrap it up early here. And before we go, though, make sure that you subscribe to Game Over Montreal everywhere you can get your podcasts, and of course here on the YouTube live show on youtube.com/SDPN. Make sure that you download the SDPN app, this way, and check out the Game Over merch. And if you are somebody who has really enjoyed Jack's commentary here tonight and his breakdown of all of these skills and things that have gone on in the game, you can go to the link in the YouTube description here, or if you're listening on the podcast, there's a link in the podcast as well for Jack's ebooks. He's written 4 books now, Jack?
A number of ebooks.
A number of ebooks. Well, anyway, all of them you can go check out, and you can use the code GameOverMTL, all one word, and get $5 off. They're all fantastic. There's really interesting stories in there, breakdowns of specific players. They're really quick, easy reads, and you will come away from it knowing something that you didn't know heading in. I swear to you, they're very good. And thanks, Jack, for coming on. Before we go, obviously, outside of the books, plug some stuff that you're doing.
So the best way to keep up with what I'm doing is on Twitter, JHANHKY. Follow me, and then enjoy my free tweets for however long they're up there for, until I decide to not tweet anymore. So
Till some NHL team grabs you up is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, I'm helping coach the PHF's Connecticut Whale. So if you ever watch women's hockey, I highly recommend it. We got some fantastic players. We play a style that's fun to watch. Catch us either on Twitch or on TSN Direct if you're in Canada.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jack. And thanks to everyone who is here with us. If you're still looking for something to watch, you can actually head on. We're streaming 2 things at once right now on STPN's YouTube channel. Jesse Blake is doing his last kick at the can in the NHL 22, or I believe it is. And he's the general manager of the Buffalo Sabres in 2026, trying to win the Stanley Cup. Built up from nothing. He keeps on blowing it, though. He had Game 6 and Game 7 in his last Stanley Cup final come from behind victories for the opposing team. So Jesse Blake, very much a Toronto Maple Leafs person at heart, blowing it at the final minute. Thanks so much for joining us here today, and we'll see you on